Good evening and welcome to Story Hour. I'm your host, Daniel Marcus. I hope that you're all healthy and safe, taking care of yourself and each other and not binge watching the news. We all have to stay informed, but it's been my observation that marinating in the constant drumbeat of the daily news cycle can get pretty toxic. So balance in all things, but we are shut in, we are locked down. We're looking for distraction and amusement that is not Tiger King. So Story Hour goes back to basics. 2 hours, 30 minutes each, telling lies. One thing that's really cool about hosting this, one of the reasons why I wanted to do it, was that I get to invite my friends to read. This week, we're all very fortunate to have Nebula Award-winning author Vylar Kaftan join us. I've known Vi for about 15 years, and I have long admired her work, so I'm very excited to have her here. I'll say a little more about her when I hand over the helm, but stick around because you don't want to miss her. If you're fortunate enough to be in a position to help other people, you might want to consider directrelief.org. Direct Relief works to get protective gear and critical care medications to as many health workers as possible, as quickly as possible. directrelief.org. Thanks. So the story that I want to read tonight is called Those Are Pearls That Were His Eyes. It first appeared in Asimov's science fiction back in '98, was reprinted in my short story collection, Binding Energy, in 2008, and then it was reissued again as an audio performance by Escape Pod in 2014. I wanted to read it tonight because it really takes us to kind of a different place. And we all could use a little of that. If you're with us via Zoom, please turn off your mic and video. I'm going to do that now as well for you guys. I should mention that there are a few adult themes and situations in this story. So you might want to send the kids off to Cartoon Network. And here we go. Those are pearls that were his eyes. The only window in Suki's bedroom opened onto an air shaft that ran through the center of the building like the path of a bullet. She would lie in bed in the hot summer nights with the salt smell of the drying seabed coming in through the open window, a sheen of sweat filming her forehead and plastering the sheets to her body like tissue, listening to her downstairs neighbors. When they made love, their cries echoing up through the air shaft made her loins ache, and she brought release to herself silently, visualizing men with slender, oiled limbs and faces hidden in shadow. Sometimes the neighbors sang, odd, sinuous music, redolent with quarter tones. The melodies wove counterpoint like a tapestry of smoke, and for some reason, Suki thought of mountains, jagged fractal peaks thrusting out of an evergreen carpet, summits brushed with snow, tongues of cloud laying across the low passes. Sometimes they argued, and the first time she heard the man's deep voice raised in anger, she was sure he was a beast, possibly an Ursa. She was less certain of the woman, but there was a sibilant, lilting quality to her voice that suggested something of the feline. They'd moved in 3 weeks before, but their sleep cycles seemed out of sync with hers, and she still hadn't met them. Suki tried to imagine herself going downstairs to borrow something, sugar, yarn, a data bead. His broad muzzle would poke out from behind the half-closed door. His liquid brown eyes would be half closed in suspicion. They would chat for a bit, though, and perhaps he would invite her in. They would teach her their songs, and their voices would rise together into the thick, warm air. Some nights there was no singing, no arguing, no love, and Suki listened to the city, a white noise melange of machinery and people in constant flux, like the sound of the ocean captured in a shell held to the ear. Beneath that, emanating from the spaceport on the edge of the city, a low intermittent hum, nearly subsonic, so faint it seemed to come from somewhere inside her own body. On those nights, she had trouble sleeping, and she would climb the rickety stairs to the roof. She couldn't see the web, of course, but she imagined that she could feel it arching overhead, lines of force crisscrossing the sky. Ships rode the web up to where they could safely ignite their fusion drives for in-system voyages, or clung to the invisible threads all the way to their convergence at the Wyrm. New moon hung in the sky, its progress just below the threshold of conscious perception, like the minute hands of a clock. She had visited there as a child, a creche trip, and she remembered the feel of the factories humming under her feet, the metal skin pocked with micrometeorite impacts stretching to the too close horizon, the tingling caress of her environment field. Heat enveloped the city like a glove around a closed fist. It kept people indoors, and business in her little shop was slow. Suki fed and watered her animals, trimmed the heart plants, and carefully tended the incubator where she was nurturing a quintet of silk pups. Not much more than embryos now, but they would bring a good price when they birthed. Tuned to imprint themselves upon the biofield of whoever first touched them, they were quite the rage among the Ken, who viewed their intense loyalty and affection with something like amusement. Of course, with the Ken, you never knew what that really meant. When Suki returned home that evening, the message light was blinking over the console in the kitchen alcove. She brushed her hand across it and the burnished surface faded, replaced by a ghostly rendering of Tam's head and shoulders. Suki jumped when she saw him. Been such a long time, and I just wanted to see how you were doing, Tam was saying. The hyaloplasm is cold. They never said it would be like this. And you never call me anymore. He paused. Sometimes it feels like no one remembers me. His image faded to black. Suki stared at the screen for a long time afterwards. They had called each other a lot after the air car crash, but it made her feel strange. It wasn't quite Tam anymore. Something of his essence had been lost in the upload, and there was a feeling of unhealthy enmeshment about staying in relationship with a ghost. She hadn't taken a new lover yet, but she was ready. She didn't want to call him back, and a tendril of guilt nagged at her as she prepared her dinner. It soon gave way to resentment. Damn it, she thought. Let the dead stay dead. He turned a corner and she couldn't follow, wouldn't, even if she could. Why couldn't he let her move on? Why couldn't he move on? Leaving her plate of stew half-eaten, she went to the console and activated the recorder. The steady yellow light above the blank screen stared at her, and she took a deep breath, trying to visualize Tam's face in place of her own shadowy reflection. I don't want you to call me anymore, Tam. I have to get on with my life. I'm sorry. Her voice caught and almost broke, but she recovered. Goodbye. With a few shaky keystrokes, she set the console to play back the message in response to Tam's signet. She returned to her meal, but she was restless. After pushing bits of vegetable and tofu from one side of the bowl to the other for the third time, she got up from the table, went to the console, and downloaded Versala Dreams, a lavish historical romance she'd been meaning to scan, rich in costumes, intrigue, and sex. She put the data bead in the reader and leaned back on the couch. The induction field wrapped around her optic nerve like an invisible coiled worm. On the 11th day of the heat wave, she awoke with the feeling that things were about to change. It was still oppressively hot, but there was a smell of clean moisture in the air, something besides death and age wafting in from the salt sea. She ate a spare breakfast of cracked wheat and blood oranges and left early for work, treading quietly as she passed the Ursa's apartment on the floor below. She could picture them in there, all the shutters drawn, he and his catwoman curled together on a padded mat, deep in the shadow of sleep. The streets were almost deserted. It was the hush before the morning flurry of activity, and she enjoyed the feeling that the city was hers alone. She had to walk nearly half a click before she found a bicycle. And the one she found had its front wheel bent slightly out of alignment so that she wobbled from side to side as she rode down the avenue of palms towards what used to be the waterfront. As she rode, the city seemed to awaken around her. The tree-lined street filled with men and women on bicycles, with beasts pulling wheeled carts. Low residential buildings of pink desert stone gave way to a chaotic clutter of commerce. Mechs wove through the traffic on silent cushions of air full of purpose. When she got to the boardwalk, she stopped and leaned the bicycle against a lamppost. Almost immediately, a pleasant-looking young man took it with an apologetic smile. "Careful," she said. "The wheel's bent." He shrugged, smiled again, and wobbled down the boardwalk before she could say anything more. Suki sighed. In the distance, wavering in heat haze, the sea hugged the flat horizon like a layer of mercury, almost too bright to look at. Long wharves stretched out into the salt flats. A strong, coppery smell hung in the air. There was a faint pop from the direction of the spaceport, like the sound a small boy might make expelling a puff of air through his lips. The ionization trail from an ascending ship cut the sky in half, faded, and was gone. The silk pups were almost ready, their vitals scrolled past on the incubator display, slender threads beginning to bear the full weight of life. The pups themselves still didn't look like much. Hairless rats, primitive and inert. She heard a noise and looked up. Standing at the counter was an elderly female Ken and her speaker. She hadn't heard them come in. "Hello," she said, a little too abruptly. The speaker's eyes rolled up in his head. "Good morning," he said. "We didn't mean to startle you. Please forgive." His voice metallic and brittle. "It's all. You have silk pups for sale?" Conversations with the Ken were always like this, off balance and skewed, full of sharp corners. Suki forced herself to look in the Ken's bird-like eyes, and she replied, "Yes, well, no, not yet, but this brood will birth tomorrow." The speaker's eyes returned to focus on Suki. She turned to him and he nodded briskly. Together, he and the Ken turned and walked out of the shop. A musty odor, like old damp cloth, hung behind them in the still air, noticeable even over the familiar smells of animals and hydroponics. Suki didn't know if she'd offended her or not, but she resolved to put it out of her mind. She was dealing with Ken after all. Business after that was slow, but a wealthy young couple bought a rare ice bird from Nortis, complete with an environmental field generator to maintain its habitat. The sale more than adequately fleshed out Suki's profit margin for the day. Feeling pleased with herself, she closed up shop early and walked down to the waterfront. The boardwalk was crowded. Beasts, Ken and their speakers, human tourists from all over. An old jetty stretched out into the salt toward the distant retreating sea like an accusing finger. It was much less crowded than the boardwalk, and Suki found herself drawn to it. As she walked down its length, hearing the wood creep beneath her feet, she wondered what it had been like when the sea was right here. She tried to imagine it. Soft blue-green, gentle on the eyes, sails and hovercraft drifting lazily to and fro. She sat down on a low bench at the end of the jetty and closed her eyes. Images of Tam's face kept intruding into her consciousness, and she pushed them away. She tried to empty her mind, to reduce herself to a simple animal present, basking in sunlight. After a short while, though, she heard footsteps tapping hollowly along the jetty, coming closer. She opened her eyes. A tall young man was approaching. There was something strange about the way he carried himself, and it wasn't until he came closer that she could see the crystals embedded in his temples. He was blind. When he came closer still, she saw the fine radial scars around his eyes. A void dancer. A shudder passed through her. A void dancer. She never met one, but everyone knew what they did. Take a one-person jump ship and dive into the Wyrm at a velocity and angle of incidents nobody had ever tried before, mapping the universe by throwing darts blindfolded in an empty room. "May I join you?" he asked. Of course, she stammered. He sat down next to her and sighed. She looked over at him, handsome except for the scars, and not as young as she had first thought. Sometimes, he said, the crowds. He faced the salt flats. The empty space is soothing. She tried to imagine the crystals in his temples sending out a silent screech of ultrasound, receiving echoes, constructing a pattern to send to his brain, bypassing his withered optic nerve. What do you see? She asked, surprised at her boldness. He smiled. His eyes were mottled pools of gray jelly, but Suki still had the sense of being held in that lifeless gaze. It's like an old photographic negative, he said. Do you know what that is? She nodded. But that's just the interpretation my brain makes of the data from the tweeters. He tapped his temple. What it actually looks like? He shrugged. What does that really mean? They were silent for a while. What do you see when you're out there? She asked. He smiled again. It's different. I don't know if I can explain it. The ship is my whole body. My awareness of things around me comes through as a kind of kinesthesia. Or that's what the medicals say anyway. The curdled jelly in his eye socket seemed to quiver gently. I sense a nearby mass as a sort of plucking at my skin. The electromagnetic spectrum gets filtered through to me as olfactory sensation, a deep hot smell for the infrared, a sharp whiff of ozone up in the UV. He paused, but I'm prattling on. Tell me about yourself. You have a name? Suki. Rowan, he said, and held out his hand. It was dry as paper and completely smooth. Do you work here in the city? Yes, I have a little shop on Front Street, not far from the spaceport, actually. Organic complements, mostly grown in-house, but I get a few naturals from time to time. He nodded. I know Front Street. Do you know that I grew up not far from there? That was a long time ago, of course. Had he eyes, they would have rolled heavenwards as he calculated the dilation. 1,107 years to be exact. The sea was still lapping at this pier. A long time ago, she agreed. Again, they were silent. Strangely, the silence did not feel awkward to Suki, but rather like they were occupying the same space together. Perhaps you'd like to come by the shop sometime, Suki said. Again, a little surprised at her boldness. Something for your ship, a bonsai tree, a heart plant. His smile was a bit forced this time, and she winced at her stupidity. I would hardly be able to enjoy it, he said. Oh, of course, but I would come to see you. Suki felt her face flush, and she wondered if his tweeters could detect the warm blood rushing to her cheeks. She took the long way home through the administrative district on the other side of the Los Gardens. A new building was going up. A crew of oxen on the ground pushed wheeled pallets piled high with building materials, while cats climbed the scaffolding that surrounded the blocky, unfinished pyramid. Suki stopped her bicycle and balanced on one foot, watching, listening. The oxen called to each other in low, bleating tones that mingled with the sibilant cries from above. It was recognizable as her own tongue, but there were words she couldn't understand. Always a few more, it seemed, each time she heard them speak, each time she stopped to listen. The beasts were changing, drifting off into their own trajectory. She envied them, their transit of undiscovered territory. The neighbors sang again that night. Lying in bed, her gaze angling up through the window, she imagined the close, hollow harmonies lifting her like a cushion of air towards the box of starry sky at the mouth of the air shaft. She thought of Rowan. He'd said he would come by the shop tomorrow. She wondered if he would. She thought of Tam. Her system had logged 2 calls from him, so she knew her message had been received. She pushed aside the feelings of guilt that began to take shape and tried to construct a picture of Rowan's face in her mind, but it was elusive. All she could evoke clearly were the eyes, moist flecks of cloudy jelly set in hollows of leathery, scarred skin. If the eyes are truly windows to the soul, she thought, what do they reveal of his? Her hand stole between her legs, and she imagined his hands moving across her body, his sweet breath warm on her neck. The peak of her pleasure braided with the music echoing up through the air shaft and segued seamlessly into a dream. They were sitting on the bench at the end of the pier. The water, blue as his eyes, made gentle sounds lapping up against the pilings. A dense, organic smell hung in the air like a fog hugging the surface of the sea. Birds wheeled across the sky. The sun was a shrunken, glaring wound. The silk pups birthed overnight, and when Suki came to the shop, they were squirming in their padded nest, crawling across one another, taking shaky, hesitant steps and collapsing in a tangle of limbs. Their psychic energy, too, was almost palpable. The air around the incubator seemed charged. Each of them was a tabula rasa, engineered to bond with the first person that touched them. There were no customers all morning, and Suki busied herself with small jobs, cleaning cages, maintaining nutrient baths. The heart plants hung heavy with fruit, the tiny fist-like buds pulsing faintly. She snapped one off, leaving a moist scar on the smooth branch. Red sap dribbled down her hand. She popped the fruit in her mouth and bit down, wincing at the explosion of salty sweetness. Just before she was about to close up shop for lunch, Rowan walked through the door. Suki was surprised and a little frightened at the surge of joy she felt. Hello. He took her hands. Hello yourself. The gray jelly in the hollows of his eyes seemed expressive, but of what, she wasn't sure. I don't have much time. I'm leaving tomorrow and I have a great deal to prepare. He paused. Suki felt something inside her wither and begin to fold in upon itself. Could you meet me tonight, he asked, midnight, the pier where we met yesterday? She nodded. Midnight. Good. He smiled, squeezed her hand, and was gone. A bubble of silence filled the shop. Gradually, the familiar rustle, whir, whisper of animals and machinery reasserted itself. She took her lunch down to the Los Gardens and sat in the shadow of the sundial, dangling her feet in one of the fountains that marked the hours. Rowan. She realized that her excitement was made keener by anticipation of loss, but she didn't care. Maybe he would take her with him. Even as the thought formed in her mind, she rejected it. Ridiculous. She was no void dancer. A creche group passed on the far side of the dial, moving almost as a single organism. Whispers and giggles floated across the plaza. Suki tried to study their faces, but from this distance, they shared a bland sameness. The group passed behind the black glassy wedge at the dial center. They must have stopped there to rest because they didn't emerge. It seemed to Suki that they had just walked off the face of the world. She was bent over the silk pup's nest, lost in their restless, wriggling motion, when her nostrils filled again with that damp musk. She looked up. The Ken and her speaker were standing in front of her. Once again, she hadn't heard them come in. Hello, she said. The Ken's bead-like eyes stared impassively back at her. She had to look away. The speaker smiled kindly, and for the first time, she noticed laugh lines around his eyes. She wondered what he had to laugh about, a speaker for the Ken. Then his smile vanished and his eyes rolled back in their sockets. You have silk pups today? Suki nodded, stepping back from the nest. Before she could say anything, the Ken reached into the enclosure and picked up a tiny squirming pup. She held it up to her shriveled face and stared at it. Gradually, the pup stopped squirming and began to emit a low, contented hum. The Ken looked at Suki. Fascinating, said the speaker. She replaced the pup in its nest, turned on her heel, and walked out the door. Suki couldn't believe what she was seeing. Dimly, she was aware of the speaker entering something on her credit pad. He touched her arm. "I'm sorry," he said. It was the first time she had heard him speak with his own voice. It was low and musical. He hurried out the door after the Ken. The silk pup lay in a corner of the nest, shivering. Suki leaned close, and she could hear a high, keening whimper. Already its litter mates were shunning it. They clustered in a writhing mass of tiny arms and legs on the other side of the nest, as far away as they could get. The imprint disrupted, the connection broken. The silk pup would soon die. There was nothing she could do. Almost nothing. She picked up the animal and held it trembling in her hand. With her other hand, she took it by the neck, closed her eyes, and gave it a quick twist. She put the body in the disposal, and for the rest of the afternoon, the shop smelled of burnt hair and ozone. Suki parked her bike in the alley next to her building, hoping nobody would ride off with it. She felt a small stab of guilt at her selfishness, but she didn't want to wander half across the city looking for a bike and be late for Rowan. 2 more attempts from Tam on her console log. When would he give up? She thought of him, bereft of flesh, suspended in purgatory, reaching back to life and light. She could no longer make the connection between that ghost and the ghost of her own memories. He was finally gone to her. To her relief, the bike was still waiting where she had left it. The night air was cool, the avenue of palms empty at this late hour. She arrived at the old waterfront 15 minutes early and walked her bike out to the end of the pier. She sat down on a wooden bench to wait. Midnight came and went. By 12:15, Suki was beginning to think that Rowan would not come. The salt flats spread out before her, luminous in the blue new moon light. Behind her, the city, asleep and not asleep, hollow as an open mouth. By 12:30, she was sure. As she mounted her bike, the ionization trail from an ascending ship lanced across the sky, followed by a faint popping sound. She blinked back the after image, a straight, bright scar across her vision, and wondered if it was Rowan. She rode home slowly through the quiet side streets. She felt nothing. As she passed by the Ursa's apartment on her way up to her own, she paused to listen. They were singing. His voice, a low modal drone, hers above, sinuous and agile, weaving in and out of the tonal center. She walked up to the door, pressed her cheek against the cold, smooth surface. The music seemed to enter her body through that contact, sending delicate tendrils down her neck, spreading through her chest and out her arms and legs, filling her with warmth. That's it. Thanks. So, onward. My co-host today, Vylar Kaftan. She is a very versatile author, comfortable in a variety of subgenres, including science fiction, fantasy, horror, and slipstream. She won a 2013 Nebula Award for her novella, The Weight of the Sunrise, as well as a 2013 Sidewise Award for short form alternate history. She was also nominated for a 2010 Nebula for her short story, I'm Alive, I Love You, I'll See You in Reno. So, Vi, take it away.
Hey, everybody. Okay, Dan, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, well, hey, everybody. Thanks for coming to the reading series tonight. I'm sure we all had a ton of social plans to go and do. My plan was to sit around touching my face tonight, and I've really enjoyed it. Been a good time. I'm safely isolated in the Bay Area with my husband. So That was his hand. So I'm here with, I guess, just his hand. As you can see, where I am, the leaves have already changed. Since none of us know what the frickin' day or time it is at all, none of us have any clue. So it's Halloween. I don't care. It's Halloween. And I figured we all needed something kind of silly right now. So I decided to read a fun, silly story, which has only a tiny bit of plague in there. See, the problem is I write a lot about plague, and most of my stories have plague. As I was looking through, there's a lot of pandemic fiction I've got going on. I've been tweeting like mad all the science I find that's really solid and that kind of stuff. So I couldn't find you a story that was 100% plague-free, but I will say nobody dies in this story, and it's a passing reference. So.
And there's not adult themes.
There are some adult themes, slightly adult themes. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to read you a story that appeared in Shimmer some time ago, a Halloween story called Something Wicked This Way Plumbs. Oh, the water cooler jug? Yeah, I get some questions about that. Not a lot of visitors here in my office, but most people notice it right away. It reminds me how important plumbing skills are. Never know when they'll save Halloween or your life. It happened last year. I'd come into the office early because I was on deadline and a month behind on bills. To make things worse, my girlfriend had the flu, and I promised to be there by 5 to take her boys trick-or-treating. So here I was in the men's restroom at 7:30 on Halloween morning. I shook out a few drops, zipped my pants, and went to the sink. It's one of those 2 faucet deals with handles on each side and a wide central spigot. I turned the cold water tap. Candy streamed out of the faucet like the entrails of a slaughtered piñata. The sink filled with Skittles, candy corn, and jelly beans. They rattled against each other as they spilled over the basin's edge. Startled, I turned the faucet off. I hoped someone was playing a Halloween prank, because the alternative was disturbing. Or maybe I wasn't awake yet. I glanced at the mirror. In dreams, you've always got weird things about your face, like snakes crawling from your eyeballs. But I looked normal, a bit scruffy, and my sleepy eyes were bloodshot. Neither of these were a problem for a freelance writer. In some circles, they might count as street cred. I looked at the sink. Still candy. I went to my office for a paper bag. My office is a closet in a small San Francisco office complex. I rent it as a workplace away from my noisy roommate. I share the complex with a dental office, a massage therapist named Dana, and an unnaturally large ficus tree. Dana says it's a spirit tree, and it brings harmony to her work. She repots it every year, which encourages its monstrous tendencies. I found a bag and emptied the recycled newspapers. I checked Dana's door, but she wasn't in yet. I took my bag to the restroom. As I scooped up candy, I noticed it was slimy, and it smelled like algae. I turned a jelly bean over in my hands, looking at the green streaks. I supposed whoever set up this prank hadn't cleaned the pipes first. How had they done this anyway? I certainly wasn't planning to eat any of it. Basic Halloween safety. Don't eat razor blades or unwrapped candy, especially from a faucet. The thought reminded me, there were 2 handles. I turned the hot water tap. Nothing. I lugged the candy back to my office, uncertain what to do with it. Maybe I could take it to the preschool next door, but after I made my deadline. To my surprise, Dana was fiddling with her office key. She was having trouble keeping it level. The dozen odd keychains dragged it down. Morning, Dana, I said. Hey, you got to come see this. Gary, hiya, she called out, finally unlocking her door and dropping her keys in the process. You're here awful early. Happy Samhain. What? Samhain, spelled Sam Hain, she said, as if the syllables were actually the 27th and 28th letters of the alphabet. Day of the Dead. Wicked New Year. Oh, well, Happy New Year, I said. I didn't know you got here this early. Yoga, what's up? Come check out the sink. She followed me to the restroom. I like Dana. She reminds me of my kid half-sister. She's always cheerful and knows everything about the Bay Area. Sometimes she brings me lunch when I'm on a tough deadline. When she's excited about something, she waves her hands around like they're talking to the air. When I turned on the tap, she waved her hands around and squeaked with delight. That's completely freaking awesome! Did you do this? No, but I'm trying to figure out who did. Someone in the dentist's office? All this sugar? Not likely. Dana picked up a handful. And the high fructose corn syrup and saturated fats and I can't believe how much of the stuff I used to eat as a kid. It's probably still inside me somewhere with all the gum I swallowed. I bet my guts could caulk a leaky pipe. It's a great prank. I hope it doesn't mess up the plumbing. Do you think it will? I squinted at the tap, trying to visualize what was behind it. It bothered me. I couldn't figure out how someone rigged the pipes. Was it something inside the faucet or deeper in the system? How could they have separated the pipe from the rest of the plumbing? And where was this candy stored? There was an awful lot of candy, a grocery bag full so far. I pictured someone hooking the pipes up to an oversized vending machine while the water heater built up pressure. The resulting image was straight from Saturday morning cartoons. We better call the water company. Dana followed me back to my office. I looked up the number and called on speakerphone. A pleasant voice said, "Please remain on the line and an operator will assist you shortly." "Awesome," said Dana. Then the music started. It wasn't bad at first. An elevator version of some classic song I should know. Dana leaned against the doorframe and I straightened my desk. After a few minutes, Dana wandered off. I looked over my project notes, then stared at the wall and daydreamed of skiing. The music continued, like a retired couple on vacation who'd forgotten where they were going. I shook my head, glancing at the time. I'd been zoning for half an hour. I opened my document and started writing. As a technical writer, I took whatever job I could get, but my specialty was instruction manuals. Today, I was writing documentation for the Wrap-O-Matic, an industrial weight shrink wrapper for use in factories. Shakespeare it ain't. I got some work done. Actually, I forgot I was still on hold. Several hours passed before I glanced out my door. The dentist's office was lit and active. Dana was nowhere in sight. I got up to look for her, but just then a girl answered the phone. "Thank you for calling. We apologize for any delay. How can I help you?" "Hi, there's candy in the plumbing." "May I have your name, date of birth, social security number, mother's maiden name, address of residence, and sun sign?" "What?" "Just kidding about the sun sign, sir." I just work here." "So do I, sir." 10 minutes later, I'd concluded the following. The water company refused to talk to anyone except the building's owner, who was on vacation this week. That was the first. Number 2, no amount of pleading, demanding, or cajoling would influence them. And 3, the statement, "We appreciate your business," can be delivered with malice, like the final knife into Caesar's unsuspecting ribs. A2 Water Company. I went into Dana's office. The room smelled like exotic spices and meditation chimes played on the stereo. Dana was rummaging around her purse. "No dice," I said. "We're on our own." Crap. She dug out some chapstick and used it. "Well, it's probably okay. I mean, anyone clever enough to rig the plumbing probably knows what they're doing." "I don't know," I said, remembering the slimy candy. "I have a bad feeling about this. Dana, what's that in the corner?" She glanced at the giant clay bowl. "Oh, it's a new pot for Krishna." "Who?" "The ficus." "The tree is already filling most of the lobby, and you want it to get bigger?" "He needs room to grow," she said. "He's a free-range ficus." Just then, Vivian burst through the door. She's the receptionist for the dental office. We trade books sometime, since our reading tastes overlap. Vivian chain smokes, but her teeth are disturbingly white. I figure she works there to pay for her habit, much like a bookstore employee. Both of you, you've got to see what's happening in the men's restroom. We went, although we knew. Vivian turned the tap. Clearly, she'd been here a while, piling candy against the wall. Candy, she announced unnecessarily, is coming out of the cold water faucet. We know, said Dana. It's a prank. Why were you in the men's restroom? The ladies' room was occupied. Well, still, they are single occupant restrooms, identical in all ways, Vivian said, giving Dana a look. Dana was looking at the sink. Hey, what happens when you turn the hot water on? I tried it, I said. Nothing. I tried it too, said Vivian with a sniff. I was hoping for airline liquor bottles. Dana said, you'd think we would have attracted some children by now, like ants to sugar. I'm glad there aren't any here, I said, thinking of my nieces. Their Halloween candy rarely lasted more than a night. They'd eat themselves sick. Agreed, said Vivian. I studied the faucet, which had developed an M&M drip. Curious, I poked a finger inside. A green tentacle slithered out and wrapped around my wrist. Dana screamed. Vivian gasped and backed off. I wrenched my arm away hard. The tentacle stretched with me. I grabbed it with my other hand and yanked. The tentacle twanged like a sickly banjo. I pulled my wrist free, and it wrapped around my other arm. It was like playing Chinese handcuffs with an octopus. I didn't want to get both hands caught, so I dragged the tentacle down and stomped on it. It quivered, then released me. It withdrew into the faucet, leaving a green trail. An eye stalk poked out. It rotated, blinking a greenish membrane over a dark orb, and then vanished. The M&Ms kept dripping. Adrenaline raced through me. Dana had a hand over her heart. Vivian was staring at me. Gary, she said, did you see? This sink is coming open right now, I said, grimly. What was it? Not human. I'll be right back. Liquor bottles, said Vivian shakily. We need them. I keep a spare set of tools in my car. I figured I could unscrew the sink drain and take a look. I didn't know exactly what to do once I was in there, but it felt better than doing nothing. I was sure after touching it. Nothing fake felt that way. The clammy touch, the slight hairiness, the way it throbbed, but more importantly, I had sensed something there. Alive. It was thinking and breathing, and it wanted something. I don't know how I got all that. Some sort of chemical or pheromone, I guessed. A communication pattern more primal than words. Or maybe it had telepathy. Nothing could explain how I knew this. Nothing in my experience at all. I should have been more frightened. I think the adrenaline kicked me into overdrive. It made a certain sense. This can't be happening, therefore it can't hurt me. A nice, logical reason. Probably something like what General Custer thought just before his last stand. Anyway, when I got back, Dana was piling candy in the corner. Vivian was blowing cigarette smoke out the open window. She wasn't supposed to smoke inside, but even Dana didn't say anything. I unscrewed the S-pipe from the sink bottom and removed the connecting framework. I peered into darkness. Dana helpfully offered a blinking purple mini flashlight. Sorry, said Dana, but it's better than nothing. Lovecraft, said Vivian, out of nowhere. What? I asked. Lovecraftian horrors, tentacles, old ones from beyond. I doubt it, I said, and then paused. I remembered the sense I'd gotten when it touched me. Impossible, but it was real. This was no prank. I stared into the darkness of the pipes, lit off and on with Dana's flashlight. Horrors. It's Halloween, insisted Vivian. The veil between the worlds is thin, Dana said. A time, not a time, and a place, not a place. Exactly, said Vivian. I prodded inside the pipe with a screwdriver, wishing I had a plumber's snake. I think aliens are more likely. Chalk one up on the board of improbable things I've said in my life. Why? Because I don't believe in magic, I said. Dana shrugged. I don't believe in freeways. Vivian blew out a long, smoky breath, then stubbed out her cigarette on the window. Why aliens? Well, assuming that it's not human and that it's sentient, which, well, just say it is. Aliens are unlikely, sure, but not impossible, like magic and monsters and so forth. And this thing, well, I don't know. Prehensile tentacles have evolutionary advantages, especially in water. Look at the cephalopod family. Like Cthulhu, said Vivian. Look, let's vote. Vote? I asked. Aliens or horrors from beyond? What good does a vote do? Asked Dana. It keeps us from panicking. Vote! All for horrors! Raise your hand! She raised hers. All for aliens! Raise your hand! I raised mine reluctantly. Both of us looked at Dana. Science fiction is not going to ruin my Samhain, she said. I'll call a plumber. When she left, Vivian lit another cigarette. Gary, I'm worried, she said. That thing is strong, I said. At least we're adults around here. I'd be worried that it'd break a kid's neck if there were any around. We stared at each other, both realizing the same thing. The candy, I said. It's bait. The monster is baiting. Fishing for kids. Gary, we're hosting trick-or-treating. What? In the dental office. Alternative trick-or-treating. We're giving them stickers and toothbrushes. The preschool kids are coming over this afternoon. We've got to keep them away from here. I can't. I have to go back to work. Well, so do I said. Maybe Dana will do it. Dana was on hold when I checked, but she said she had clients all afternoon and she couldn't cancel them. That left me and my laptop. I sighed. I took my power supply and sat on the toilet, fully clothed. I worked on my instruction manual again. Occasionally, I glanced at the sink and the hole below it, half expecting a tentacle to snake toward my ankle. At one point, I coughed, and a single gummy bear shot out from the hole. It lay on the ground like a shiny treasure. Nuh-uh, I said. You're not fooling me. I was getting hungry, but luckily Dana knocked on the door and handed me a bologna sandwich. After I ate it, I felt better. I focused on work, hoping I'd be done by mid-afternoon. Well, I would have been, except I was writing on a toilet. Even clothed, the pose inspired my body's basic needs. I glanced at the sink. I didn't like the idea of pulling down my pants near free-flying tentacles. I poked my head out the door. Small ghosts, witches, and cartoon characters filed through the dentist's office, emerging with plastic baggies that disappointed them when they looked inside. One of Dana's clients was just leaving. I knocked on her door. Hey, Gary, she said. No plumber. They're booked for today, unless you have $500 handy. Dana, come guard the restroom for a few minutes. Why? I need to use it. The other one. Dana's brow furrowed, then she grinned. Okay, I'll be right there. The phrase right there for Dana meant a 5-minute stop at the ficus tree. She petted its branches and murmured something. I got a cup from the nearly empty water cooler and drank some water. Dana was still talking to the tree. Dana, I said, can't this wait? It won't take long, she said. Krishna likes attention at 3 o'clock. I sighed. A small child wandered by, looking mournful. He tossed a toothbrush in the garbage. When Dana was done, we went to the restrooms. She stood by the men's room while I used the women's. I tested the sink before doing my business. Afterward, as I washed my hands, I heard a shriek. I rushed out. Dana was pressed against the restroom door, mobbed by excited children. What is it? What's going on? I asked. They found it, she shouted over the noise. You were supposed to be guarding it. Well, this one kid was crying that he would wet his pants. So, oh my God, I said, Dana, we've got to stop them. I'm trying, she said. She was drowning in a sea of preschoolers. Their teachers tried to restrain them, but it was like pulling water back from the falls. Dana and I looked at each other, panicking. On inspiration, I ran to her office and grabbed the heavy ceramic pot. I forced my way through the kids and plunked it down. "That'll do it," I said. The preschoolers tugged on the door handle, but couldn't move the giant pot. Dana and I escaped to my office. My voicemail was blinking. Thinking it might be the water company, I picked it up. Instead, I heard my girlfriend's croaking voice. "Hi, honey. I feel awful. I guess you're working. The neighbors said there was a trick-or-treat thing at the dentist's office in your building, so they took the boys over. They should be there any minute. I love you. I'm gonna go die now." I ended the call, shaken. It was bad enough to think of an alien eating random preschoolers, but my girlfriend's kids here at risk. "No," I said out loud. "I won't let it." "What do we do?" asked Dana. Vivian stuck her head through the door. "Gary," she said, "we've got to do something." I said, "We've got to investigate the plumbing. Someone needs to get into maintenance and figure out what's going on." Both women looked at me. Had there been crickets, they would have chirped. "I would like to know why," I said. "In the face of equal incompetence, men are always expected to deal with the plumbing." "I just did my nails," said Vivian. "I'm too young to die," said Dana. I sighed. "Fine, that's fine." I put on my jacket. My adrenaline must have kicked in again, because secretly I liked the idea of being a hero, preferably not a dead one. "The maintenance door is outside in the back, yeah, right? I think I saw it there." "Yeah," said Dana. "I'll show you." Vivian said, "I'll take care of these kids." Dana and I went out the back door. Behind us, we heard Vivian proclaim, "Children, you'll get candy later, but first, I'll tell you a Halloween story, a chilling tale full of tiny monsters called bacteria." "That one," said Dana, pointing at an unmarked door. "Maintenance." It was locked, of course. "Crap," I said. "Got a fire axe?" "I don't think so," she said. Although, ooh, hang on. Dana ran inside. She returned with a sheathed dagger. I blinked. She unsheathed it and traced an imaginary door frame around the real one. I half expected the door to explode in a smoky mess, but instead she worked the dagger's tip into the lock. Dana wiggled it until the lock broke. She pushed the door open. She sheathed the dagger and saw me staring at her. "An athame," she told me. "Ceremonial dagger for tonight's Samhain ritual." "Where'd you learn that trick?" I asked. "Oh, my boyfriend," she said. "He taught me some things. Switchblade, athame, they kind of work the same. I'll wait here. I got you back." Simultaneously, I felt safer and more frightened. Maintenance was dark. I walked in, groping for a light switch. My hand connected and light flooded the room. I wasn't an expert plumber, but I knew the basics. I found the water heater and the water main right away. That weird sense of something alien was stronger here. The room doubled as a storage area, with boxes, crates, and extra water cooler jugs. Nearby, a shelf above the reserve tank held more tools, including a shutoff wrench. I studied the plumbing. Probably was upstream of the water heater, where there was more space. I examined the main, a large red elbow with valves at both ends. The creature was inside. I could feel it. Something probed at my mind, wondering who and what I was. I couldn't understand it in words. The closest I got were concepts. Too big and not edible. It was comforting. "Hi," I whispered. Then I thought at it, hoping it could understand me. "Who are you? What do you want?" A bologna sandwich appeared in my mind. I suspected it was a translation rather than a literal request. "You can't eat the kids," I thought. "I won't let you." Tentacles writhing at strange angles. I think it was pouting. I shook my head. "No, I can't let you do that. Where are you from?" Weird sensations overwhelmed me. Water that floated, a buzzing shriek, Gasoline smell, a white sky with black stars. It felt untranslatable and made me dizzy. Stop, I'm not understanding. I was freezing and then hot, and my insides turned around me. My mouth tasted like scales and salt. Whatever it was saying, my brain could not cope. I staggered toward the door. Stop, I begged it. I was drowning in poisonous water, then floating in thick air. I understood this would never stop, not until it had acquired a bologna sandwich, metaphorically speaking. With that image, all went silent. I felt like I'd been soaked in cold water. I stumbled outside, pressing a hand to my forehead. Dana was waiting there. Gary, she said, what happened to you? I blinked, distracted by my sudden sandwich craving. There's definitely something in the plumbing, and it wants to eat the kids. We've got to stop it. How? I thought for a moment and remembered the wet feeling it gave me. I think it lives in water. That's why it's in the pipes. I'm going to shut the water off. I steeled my mind. Then I marched back into maintenance and grabbed the shutoff wrench. The creature must have read my thoughts because I was racked with an agonizing headache, like a beginning cymbal class in my skull. I fell to my knees. The creature flooded me with confusing sensations of pain and noise. I fought it by humming a lunch meat commercial jingle from childhood. I crawled forward, trying not to think too hard. I had just spelled the bologna's last name when I hooked the shutoff valve and wrenched it. Silence filled the room. My headache eased, although my brain kept humming the jingle. For a minute, I thought the creature was dead. Then I felt its presence in the reserve tank, even angrier than before. It must have slithered in there when I turned the water off. Oh, no, you don't. Before it could do anything, I opened the pressure valve. Water sprayed everywhere. I felt pain again, but this time it was someone else suffering, a creature's dying cry. I sensed it begging for help. I was right, the creature needed water, and I was killing it. I felt awful. It wasn't the creature's fault it was hungry. After all, it was just a predator doing what it was born to do, like sharks or TV psychics. Maybe if I were stuck in the plumbing on some alien planet, I'd be looking for a sandwich too. I hadn't planned the next step, but I reacted fast. I grabbed a water cooler jug. I pierced the top with the shutoff wrench and dumped out half the water. Straining under the weight, I pressed it against the open valve. Come on, buddy. Come on. Shoop! Something green burst through the wide valve like a snot ball blown into a Kleenex. It landed squarely in the water jug. The impact knocked me to the floor. The jug landed next to me. I looked at the slimy mass crammed inside the plastic. Eyeballs dotted the surface like a Dalmatian's spots. Green tentacles drooped from the jug's mouth like willow branches or a fern, said Dana from the doorway. It totally looks like a fern. You okay? It does, kinda, I said. And yeah. The tentacles wiggled. I sensed gratitude. What do we do with it? I don't know, I said. Let's take it inside for now. We took it into my office and set it on the shelf. Vivian joined us, leaving sobbing preschoolers in her wake. Her jaw dropped at the sight. We gotta call the feds about this, she said. And give it to them? Dana asked. They'll hurt the poor thing. It's dangerous, said Vivian. Isn't it, Gary? I looked at the creature in the jug. It wouldn't escape, I was sure, and it didn't look dangerous. Just squished. I got the feeling it was very sorry for what it had done. I said, actually, I'm with Dana. I think it'll be okay in the jug, as long as we don't repot it. But what do we do with it? Asked Vivian. I looked around my office. Any ideas? I asked. I got the image of typing tentacles and instruction manuals stacked up on my desk. I liked the idea. It's a deal, I thought. No one reads the damn things anyway. I said, well, I've got an empty shelf here. So that's the story of the water cooler jug. After all, with enough monkeys and time, you really can get Shakespeare. All you have to do is feed it. You may have noticed that you've been craving a bologna sandwich for the last 10 minutes. It's normal in this office. Here, throw it a Vienna sausage. The end.
Oh man, that was great.
I
More
hope
fun
I
than a
have
barrel of
made people's,
shotguns.
sorry.
More fun than a barrel of shotguns.
I hope I have made people's days and evenings better with brought a little joy. I have a novella. I'm nominated again for a Nebula. So my novella, Her Silhouette in Water, which I can pull in and out of the leaves. That's so cool.
Oh, cool.
Whoa. Okay. Anyway, it's on Amazon if you're interested. But we now that it's Halloween, I'm afraid I do have to put you back in April. But hopefully you enjoyed your visit. And yep, thank you, Dan, for hosting, and thank you to
Yeah.
everyone for attending.
Thanks, bye. That was a great story.
Thank you.
And thanks everybody for joining us at Story Hour. Please keep an eye on storyhour2020.com for updates. You won't want to miss next week when we have the fabulous Pat Murphy and the fabulous Greg Bossert. So I'm really looking forward to that. So please stay safe, take care of yourselves and each other, and good night.